There are conflicting opinions from health experts about a fourth surge in coronavirus. Dr. Anthony Fauci says he's concerned about another surge. COVID-19 cases as numbers tick up in some states and Europe. Historically, the U.S. has traditionally trailed by about 4 weeks in its COVID trajectory. Joining me on the morning show is Dr. Jonathan Kantor, an epidemiologist with the Penn Center for Epidemiology. So, differing opinions. Where do you stand? Does history repeat itself?
Well, I think it's definitely a major concern. I think none of us are in a position to really be able to predict the future. I think if the pandemic has taught us nothing else, it's not to have too much hubris. But at the same time, I think it also has taught us that it's so important to be cautious and to be constantly worrying about what could happen and not hoping just for the best. And so I think it's important for us to hope that we're not going to see that surge, but to act in such a way as if we may see it. And what I mean by that is that we need to continue with our press for rapid vaccination of as many people as possible and continue with the smart things that we're already doing, things like social distancing, wearing masks, and all those other things.
So we see what's been happening with the spring breakers down in Miami Beach, having to impose that curfew, and people are traveling more. Is this going to be the real test?
I think it is. I think this is definitely, I think we've got a combination, a constellation of factors that are really coming into play here. My concern is that we don't want to see the perfect storm of A, people traveling more, as you mentioned, B, the spring break things going on, C, people kind of getting this positive messaging about us getting out of the pandemic and thinking that that leads to a decreased urgency, because my concern is that those things can combine. And instead of people feeling like, oh, my goodness, as soon as I can get a vaccine, I really need to get in line. I really need to get one as soon as possible. They may be thinking, well, this pandemic's going to be over in a few months anyway. What's all the fuss about? So I think it's really important for all of us to kind of keep that in mind. And I think there's definitely the risk that all those things together can, present a concerning situation for another surge. But again, hopefully the rate of vaccination is going to keep up or exceed that. And again, that's not even to mention the big concern about the variants, which is why we're really racing against the clock here.
So let's talk about the AstraZeneca vaccine. Yesterday, we were told it was found to be 79% effective. Let's move it on to the FDA and see what they think. There were the concerns about it causing blood clots, and they said, no worries about it. Now this morning, the NIH says the trial may have relied on outdated info. The public wasn't going to have a lot of confidence in this vaccine anyway because of the whole blood clot issue. Now this, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think this is really, one of these situations where in some ways it feels like, at least in the U.S., the rollout of the AstraZeneca vaccine has sort of been cursed, because at every kind of key point, every time we think we're kind of taking one step forward, we take 2 steps back. Certainly, it's highly irregular for the FDA to come out publicly and make comments to that effect. The thing to keep in mind, of course, is that this is a vaccine that's already been approved in multiple other countries. I think it's very clear that the concerns that were raised in terms of blood clots and things like that were probably just noise. They were not a real a concern. And there's been a lot that's been talked about, certainly in Europe, with EU versus Britain on the rollout here. At the one hand, the EU has been complaining that they're not getting enough of the vaccine. At the same time, they then kind of halt the distribution of the vaccine and then restart it a few days later. So I think there are a lot of things going on behind the scenes. My sense is that those things don't have anything to do with vaccine safety or efficacy, however. So I think if I were offered the AstraZeneca vaccine and that were the vaccine that I were offered, I would have no problem taking it.
All right. And as far as lowering the age threshold, there's some concern that people, 25 to maybe 30, 35, may be a bit hesitant to get those vaccinations. Is that worrisome as we try to reach that so-called herd immunity?
Yeah, I think it's very worrisome. We've been seeing that a lot. If you look at the data coming out from the military vaccination rates, I think some of it is this sort of been a very tepid response to, instead of this kind of enthusiastic embrace of the vaccine, which you're certainly seeing among the medical community in the military. I think in the non-medical community, I think you have been seeing a lot of reluctance. And so if we see that echoed in the general population, I think that is a source of concern, because unless a large proportion of those people have been infected, they're obviously going to serve as a kind of a potential a source for future infections in the future. So I think it's so important for all of us to be vaccinated. And this is what I tell my family members. If you have access to the vaccine and you're over age 16 or 18, depending on the vaccine that you're using, absolutely, you should get it as quickly as possible.
All right, Dr. Kenner, always good to talk to you. 7:47 weather time.